Good afternoon. I am going to call to order this regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole for Wednesday, December 5th, 2018. My name is Andrea Jenkins, and I am the chair of this committee. With me at the dais this afternoon is Council members Palmisano, Johnson, Goodman, Orsame, Schrader, Council President Bender, Council members Cunningham, Fletcher, Reich, and Cano, and let the record reflect that we do have a quorum. And so our agenda today, we have 3 items in addition to the reports of our committee. And consent item number 1, we will dispense with the consent item agenda first. And we only have 1 item today, which is the designation of polling places for 2019. While Minneapolis currently does not have any elections, state statute requires us to designate polling places in case there are any elections scheduled. I move approval of this item. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? And just for expediency, we will be using speaker management today, and I don't see any. All those in favor of this motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. And that item carries. Our second item for today is the Minneapolis 2040 Comprehensive Plan. And before beginning this committee's final consideration of this item, I will ask staff to give us a brief presentation to remind us of where we've been and the final process that we will follow. And I believe that Ms. Worthington is at the podium. Good afternoon, Ms. Worthington.
Thank you, Chair Jenkins. Council members, good afternoon. I would like to just make a brief statement and then stand for any questions you may have. Minneapolis is growing and will continue to grow. Done right, this new growth can help our city become a more healthy, sustainable, and thriving place for everyone. The Minneapolis 2040 is a draft comprehensive plan that shapes how the city will grow and change. And the draft covers topics such as housing, job access, the design of new buildings, and how we use our streets. Over the past 2 years, the people of Minneapolis have told us a lot about their vision and hopes for the future of our city. A main theme we heard is that as the city grows, everyone must benefit from that growth. Historically, not everyone has in Minneapolis. This draft plan is one opportunity to undo barriers and overcome inequities created by a history of policies in our city that have prevented equitable access to housing, jobs, and investments. The revised draft of the plan is the product of a thoughtful 2-year effort and integrates more than 15,000 public comments collected during the last 4 months and over the 2-year period of the community engagement. This feedback made the plan stronger and more reflective of our community's values. The Metropolitan Land Use Planning Act requires municipalities in the Twin City area to provide the Metropolitan Council with an updated comprehensive plan every 10 years. The comprehensive plan must be consistent with the Metropolitan goals in Thrive 2040 that set the direction for the region's growth and development. Local communities are served by regional systems planned by the Metropolitan Council, including housing, transportation, wastewater collection and treatment, and regional parks. While Minneapolis 2040 is intended to meet the requirements of state statute and the Metropolitan Council, the plan also has particular significance for Minneapolis in a time of population growth. The city will use this plan to guide decision-making that affects the long-term future of our city as it relates to the built, natural, and economic environment. The final draft of the plan was released this fall for consideration by the Planning Commission, which held a public hearing on October 29th. The City Council held a public hearing on November 14th. And today we are asking you to consider a resolution to advance the plan to the Metropolitan Council for their review and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Worthington. And so we have this recommendation before us, and I will move approval on this item. Are there any discussions and/or final amendments? Council President Bitter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move an amendment to the built form map as captured in the maps that each council member has before them. I would characterize these mostly as sort of technical changes, just parcels that were not caught in the more citywide amendment that I brought at the markup meeting last week. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, these are in wards 12 and 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President Bender. Are there any other, Council Member Gordon?
Sorry, I'm not all signed in yet. I would just like some clarification about what the change is from and to. I actually have a little bit of trouble matching up some of the colors, and this looks a little like it could be interior 1 on the 42nd Street in East Hiawatha, or maybe it's even Parks, I'm not sure, or Transit 20. So it would be nice to know, since they're not printed on the sheet, what the change is.
Can staff please help to answer that question?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Gordon. I'm sorry, Councilor, you were asking about the one on 42nd Street?
I actually wouldn't mind hearing about all 3 of them because it's just a little bit hard to know what it used to be and what it's becoming based on just the color shapes.
Sure. So starting with the first sheet on 42nd Street at Hiawatha Avenue, that was previously Corridor 4, and it's showing Interior 1. On the second sheet, the parcels shown to change in this proposed amendment are moving from Interior 3 to Interior 2. The third sheet is moving, excuse me, to Parks and Open Space from Corridor 6. That's a correction to reflect the guidance of the Above the Falls plan. And then the last sheet is the same parcel again. This is the land use map, not the built form map, moving from one of the mixed use categories to Parks and Open Space.
So on 46th Street and Minneapolis, that map there, the pinkish ones on 46th Street,
Those are
getting
corridors.
that right? They're not changed?
They're not changing.
Okay. And what does that color represent?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Gordon, the color on 46th Street that's not changing is Corridor 6.
Corridor 6.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Which looks really dark down here.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, are there any other amendments? What? Oh, Councilmember Connell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you should have before you a copy of policy number 61, which in the comp plan is slated as environmental justice, and this is an amendment to add the green zones designation language and recognition of that designation process. So this started for me about 2 or 3 weeks ago when I was chatting with other colleagues about potentially bringing forward a green zones standalone change. But as we further refined that question and we started looking at the ways that this language was laid out in the environmental justice chapter, it just seemed to make more sense to kind of merge the two. And I reached out to city staff and sustainability and our coordinator's office, as well as one of our previous members on the environmental justice climate plan, Shalini Gupta, to help us figure out how to align this, the Sustainability Office's work around environmental justice with the comp plan language and the green zones legislative actions that our local municipal government has codified in previous actions. And we realized that there wasn't an agreed upon environmental justice definition. And so staff and our community expert worked together along with another organization called SEED to come up with a definition that is before you today. And there's also, they're also leaning on the EPA's definition of addressing environmental justice issues in the community. And so what you have here before today is the culmination of a collaborative piece of work with staff, community experts, and as well as my lens to connect this work to some of the work that we're doing around green zones. So would love to see if there's any questions or feedback, and bringing this forward to be considered for approval.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much. I'm very supportive. I also note that we didn't actually vote on the map changes yet, so I'm not sure what course of action we're taking. But we can vote on this first and go back to the maps too, but I don't believe we approved them yet either. And I also have another amendment. So I don't know if we wanted to preview all three amendments.
Let's go ahead and preview all of the amendments,
Okay.
and then we'll vote on them one by one.
Okay, so you should have before you an amendment from me. It says motion by Gordon, and this is actually a fairly minor amendment. After I looked at the work we've done on our other amendments and the language chosen, I decided that I wanted to kind of reintroduce and alter one of the amendments that I made that was approved. In the original language, it mentioned adopting an ordinance and guaranteeing some things in that ordinance, and I realized that might not be the appropriate wording for the comprehensive plan, where most of our strategies are exploring, researching, pursuing. So I wanted to change adopting to exploring ordinances, and not say we're going to guarantee, but the ordinances will include the right of first refusal and opportunity to purchase. It's before you. I think it's pretty clear. It's pretty minor, and I ran this by the city attorney's office too, and they think this language is more appropriate for the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I put myself in queue to speak in favor and support of Councilmember Cano's motion, though I also appreciate Councilmember Gordon's clarification. I think the attention to making sure we're engaging the city attorney's office in the language. I just wanted to note that the green zones additions here is one of the many ways that council members strengthened the comprehensive plan, and in making it more specific in its commitments to race equity and making those broad goals more actionable. And I think this is a great example, along with some of the other amendments that council members brought, and just wanted to express my appreciation for the leadership of the council members who brought these changes, and particularly to Councilmember Cano, who's been working to lead on the green zones for many years. And I think this is one of the ways where, if we're able to be more proactive in looking for opportunities to support environmental justice, I think we'll really reap the benefits of that over time, and really take a systems approach and a citywide approach. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on any of those proposed amendments? So we will take up the first amendment by Council President Bender, a map amendment, changing the 42nd Street in wards 12, 46th Street, and then in Ward 1, Lowry Avenue. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. That item carries. The next amendment is to Policy 61, Environmental Justice, offered by Councilmember Cano. All those in favor of that amendment indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. That item carries. And then the last amendment by Councilmember Gordon, which is a text amendment to the policy item number 42, G 3.25. All those in favor of this amendment indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. And that item carries. And so that brings us back to the original proposal to adopt a resolution to move the Minneapolis 2040 Comprehensive Plan to the Metropolitan Council. I will now ask the clerk, is there any other discussion? And I see Council President Bender in queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to express my appreciation again to each member of the City Council for working so collaboratively on this really massive undertaking. And I think the draft that we're forwarding for approval at the final council meeting on Friday is something to be really proud of. And, you know, our work to take local action to fight climate change and to address head on our city's history of racial exclusion in housing, again, are something to be proud of. And so I think the details really matter, and I know people have dug in, and this is a product that will evolve over time, over many years, and I know each council member will have a piece in that. But I think that we set out with 14 very ambitious and bold goals, and I'm very proud of the way that the details of this plan set us up for success in achieving them. And I want to thank our staff for just going so above and beyond, and all the nights and weekends and holidays that were spent making sure that we had everything that we needed to make these difficult decisions as policymakers. And it is so appreciated. It does not go unnoticed. And again, I always want to say this, we don't expect it to be the norm going forward. So, thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you, President Bender. Next in queue is Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things. One is I wanted to give an update from our first markup session on 2040. There was a piece of it that was related to notice and giving notice as we move forward with this plan. And I have been in communication with many of you, but not all of you, about where that effort has gone. I have decided instead to probably most appropriately move it as a staff direction at council on Friday. So to separate it out from being a part of the written comprehensive plan, but instead just to bring it, and I'm happy to speak with others about that. It would be about asking staff to come back with a communications plan, essentially. And I think that that seems most of interest to everybody here on this council. The second piece that I just wanted to absolutely clarify, because I clarified this several times with the clerk's office, is that today we are not voting to adopt this comprehensive plan and send it to Met Council. Rather, we are forwarding this to Friday to vote on this as a body. So I just wanted to clarify that for the public and make sure my colleagues understood that as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano, and I will reiterate, I stated that incorrectly. We are moving to forward this to the City Council this coming Friday, at which time, if it passes, we will then forward to the Met Council. Councilmember Cunningham, did you still want to? Thank you very much. And so I will now ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Cano.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami is absent. President Bender.
Aye.
Chair Jenkins.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That item carries. And our next item is the next step in our strategic and racial equity action plan. And we will have a presentation from Ms. Andrea Larson and Joy Marsh Stevens from the City Coordinator's Office. Welcome, Ms. Larson.
Thank you, Chair Jenkins. Good afternoon. I'm Andrea Larson, Director of Strategic Management in the Coordinator's Office, and I'm here to give an update on the Strategic and Racial Equity Action Plan as we look to approve 4 operational enterprise priorities. I'm joined by Joy Marsh-Stevens, who leads our Division of Race and Equity, as well as Lisa Tabor of Culture Brokers, who has been the consultant leading this process. And we have a couple of our process owners who lead the work of the content that's the focus of this this plan that are in the room today as well. Casey Carl, Sean Skibby, and Patience Ferguson, who have spent a lot of time and energy of their own and their staff on this plan as well. The Strategic and Racial Equity Action Planning process is an ambitious plan. And this is the first chapter of our work. We're excited to share the progress that's been made this year and are looking forward to continuing this work in 2019. I'll start with a quick reminder of the Strategic and Racial Equity Action Plan's 5 major deliverables. The first is to refine the city's vision and goals, to create plans around GARE's 5 recommended policy areas, or racial equity elements, rather, to begin strategic prioritization as an enterprise and to align this work with the city's budget. Today, we'll be sharing work happening in 4 of the 5 elements of the Racial Equity Action Plan, knowing that the policy work will be coming in 2019. You have previously seen this slide, so I'll briefly review this again. Essentially, this outlines the timing and approach for the deliverables mentioned on the prior slide. The work of digging into the vision and goals will be happening at the beginning of 2019. We're currently working with City Council and Mayor to find available dates in January to do this work. The 5 recommended GARE elements have been split such that we have nearly completed operational planning sessions around 4 areas this year: data, engagement, workforce, and spend. Regarding the policy area, the mayor and council started this work this year in August and September, and refining and operationalizing policy work will continue to happen in 2019. And in order for this work to inform how we allocate our resources, a staff direction directing the budget office to recommend a methodology for defining core was given last Friday, and the current plan is to begin this implementation of this in 2019, parallel with the other work happening on this plan. We will today share some of the details of the
Excuse me, Ms. Larson, we
Yeah.
have a question or a comment from Councilmember Cunningham.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Excuse my interruption. I wanted to talk actually about the mission, vision, and goals. One of the things that I've heard from my colleagues, and I share the concern, is that we also haven't fully laid out and defined our values. So equity, like being able just to have those one words, we're still operating off the values that were determined in the previous council. And so with this new council, it would be really great to have us, as we go through this, be able to name even just those really basic values that we're operating from in the first place, because this council and mayor may have a different value set than what the previous folks did. So is it possible for us to include values in that process too?
Chair Jenkins, Councilmember Cunningham, it is. We can include that as a part of the scope when we have those sessions. And I would encourage us to think about the values not just as those words, but as the work that we're outlining in this plan, ensuring that it's waterfalling, to be in order to make sure that we're able to operationalize those values.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that, because I, like I said, I know that a few of us have really wanted to make sure that that's a part of the process. So thank you.
So before we jump into the details from the 4 elements that we've been planning around this fall, I'll give a brief overview of the process that we've used and the structure so that you know what you're looking at. The process we use to operationalize these 4 areas is called metrics of urgency. Metrics of urgency is based on the 6 Sigma methodology, which uses problem-solving tools to reduce variation and defects. The process uses data to isolate what are called the vital few projects within a process. By implementing these projects, the data indicates we will have the best opportunity to meet the desired outcomes. For each of the 4 enterprise operational policy areas, we'll walk through the strategic need, the key lagging indicator, corresponding goal, and share potential metrics of urgency and vital few projects that staff may implement post-adoption by the mayor and the council. A couple notes on this process. First, it's a new process. It introduces rigor and discipline into how the city decides to plan its work and invest its resources. And as we implement this new rigorous process, we are digging deeper into these issues. We may find that processes don't actually exist to solve these problems, that the data we're using doesn't really answer our question. We may find that the problem we initially thought was a problem isn't. In short, though, this rigor helps us to begin to improve and learn. Throughout these last few months, we've been through 4 iterations of the metrics of urgency process. Each time we learned more and made appropriate changes and adjustments so that we continue to get closer to common agreement on the first problem that needs to be solved in order to make progress. As a result, we're collectively more confident that solving that problem will deliver significantly better results. It is also important to note that strategic and racial equity action plans cannot be rigid. They must be regularly checked in on and evolve as necessary to keep ensuring that we're doing the right thing to get the results that we want. And that means that we should be thinking about this like a living, breathing document and plan that can change as we change, as we make progress, and as we get new information. So with that, Joy Marsh-Stevens will walk through the specific details and next steps.
Good afternoon. So the definitions that are here on this slide are there to as a reference for you as we get into the details within each of these 4 different policy areas. So starting first with spend, we identified in our last presentation that our strategic need for spend is to increase the percent count of and the spend with racially and ethnically diverse for-profit suppliers across all departments. And in looking at this, ultimately our goal here is for an annual disparity index of 80 or higher for African American, Hispanic American, and Native American suppliers. Essentially what this is saying is right now our utilization of suppliers within these different racial ethnic categories is much lower than 80, and we want to be able to increase that across all of our citywide spending with for-profit suppliers in all of our departments. So some of the metrics that we've begun to look at potentially to apply in this area is, again, percentage of utilization with African American, Hispanic American, and Native American owned businesses, owned suppliers by industry, as well as percent availability of African American, Hispanic American, and Native American owned bidders by industry. And so as we've thought about approaches to that, some of the projects or activities that we're considering is improving our processes so that we're ensuring that the number of city bidders within the African American, Hispanic American, and Native American owners match their presence in the marketplace. We know that there are potential companies that are out there that could be doing business with the city that are not currently on our bidder list, and we want to make sure that we're increasing that. Additionally, we want to implement an objective process for evaluating and selecting our suppliers. And so looking within both of these as potential projects that we're going to engage in as we implement towards the strategic need to meet this goal. We understand as a city that racially and ethnically diverse businesses really help drive the city's economic growth, and diversifying our government's vendor base increases our access to high quality products and services, supports competitive pricing, and ensures that we are doing our fair share in supporting important sources of income and jobs in racially and ethnically diverse communities. With regard to racially disaggregated...
Excuse me.
Yep.
Ms. Marsh-Stevens, we have a question or a comment from Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Marsh-Stevens. I wanted to, just for the record, could you explain why Asian and Pacific Islanders were not included in these goals?
That's a great question. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Cunningham, and Chair Jenkins. Nice to see you. The reason why is because according to the disparity study, there is no disparity between availability and utilization of Asian American businesses.
Great, thank you.
And the other thing to note across all four of these different categories, again, as we listed the definitions of 401 vital few projects and really focusing this process, there are lots of other opportunities to look at across all of these four areas, but really the goal of this is to really isolate and identify where are the ways in which we can focus based on the data to most effectively reach the outcomes that we've identified. So with racially disaggregated data, our strategic need, as a reminder, is to improve the use of racially disaggregated data for decision making through the legislative process. And so essentially what our goal is here is to look at increasing the utilization of this data in the RCA process. So as departments are creating requests for committee action, wanting to increase the opportunities for us to be including racially disaggregated data in those RCAs so that we're best able to support our policymakers in making decisions that include that data. So part of the metric of urgency there is looking at the number and the percent of need for racially disaggregated data in our RCAs, as well as the number and percent of times that racially disaggregated data is being included in our RCAs. So in order to accomplish that, we're looking at doing a needs assessment for policy and instruments for committees. So looking to develop those opportunities for staff to know when best to be using racially disaggregated data in creating RCAs, as well as creating policy and instruments for committees as well. Additionally, we want to develop a process for documenting, tracking, and reporting racially disaggregated data in our RCAs. We do understand that the city's legislative process, the standing committees, that they play a critical role in exercising primary oversight of specific areas of municipal policy, as well as those departments and divisions within their purview. In particular, committees deliberate and recommend city ordinances, local laws, regulations, and policies, which usually regulate persons, property, and usually relates to matters of a general and permanent nature. Standing committees are also responsible for evaluating and making recommendations on all matters referred to them. And so as a result of that, it's critically important to us to make sure that racially disaggregated data is helping to inform that process. For community engagement, our strategic need focuses on increasing the capacity of our appointed boards and commissions, also referred to as ABCs, in order to advance the city's racial equity work. We recognize that that the role of appointed boards and commissions advising the mayor and council on city policies and practices can be increased, and the effectiveness of this advice can be increased by helping them to consider racial equity in their decision-making process. So our goal in this category is that when applicable, again, 100% of all boards and commissions, appointed boards and commissions, will include some level of racial equity analysis in their recommendation process. So our metrics of urgency include looking at the percent of need for any kind of equity analysis in the ABC deliberation process, and the number and percent of times in which an equity analysis was conducted. So both first establishing when it's needed, and then also measuring the times and the percentage of times in which it's actually done. So in order to accomplish this, some potential vital few projects include developing a needs assessment policy and instrument that appointed boards and commissions will use, implementing a racial equity analysis policy and instrument for appointed boards and commissions, as well as implementing a process for documenting, tracking, and reporting appointed boards and commission equity deliberations.
Excuse me, we have a question from Councilmember Gordon.
It's not necessarily a question, but I did want to make a comment that I'm intrigued by the notion of the racial equity analysis policy and instrument for the boards and commissions. I think if we come up with an effective instrument and we may pilot test it there, we could certainly use that in council offices and also within various departments and maybe expand it and refine it. So I appreciate this as a first priority step to take, but also I just want to let you and everyone know that I see this as also laying some groundwork out ahead of us of where we can take these next. So thank you.
Chair Jenkins, Councilmember Gordon, absolutely yes. I mean, so as we focus on these specific projects within these categories, the idea is that there's applicability across all different areas of our work. And I know even in the development of the ordinance that Council passed back in December for the Division of Race and Equity and the establishment of the Racial Equity Steering Committee and the Racial Equity Community Advisory Committee, there was multiple references to creating tools like this. And so this is yet another way for us to reinforce and begin to implement in that area.
Councilmember Cunningham.
I wanted to wait until someone else asked a question before I asked another. So I actually have a question about the racially disaggregated data. I do believe we've talked about this before, but I'm curious around the conversations. I know that typically we use census data, which is why it's racially disaggregated, but in terms of the data that we gather ourselves here at the city, are there opportunities for us to be able to disaggregate that ethnically as well, so that we're able to parse apart and see when we talk about Black that also includes Somali folks, that includes African Americans, it includes a spectrum, and so same for the Asian community, like Hmong folks, for example. So I'm just curious if there are opportunities within all of what we do here to gather ethnically disaggregated data as well.
More broadly than what's in the census. Chair Jenkins, Councilmember Cunningham. Okay. Do you want to speak to some of that from a data co-op perspective?
Chair Jenkins, Councilmember Cunningham. There is an opportunity to do that. I think this, as Joy previously mentioned, is sort of the place where we're going to first start. But certainly as we think about disaggregating data that goes to council, the way we collect data is not always consistent, and it doesn't always align with census. And so I think more broadly speaking, our goal is to be able to disaggregate the data racially or ethnically, depending on how we gather it, as much as we possibly can to inform our decisions. And so we will have to be a little bit flexible because it really does vary. I mean, I know that when we make different reports with different data, we see that there are different groups that, sometimes are broken down further than at other times. And so we'll just have to do our best with this for now. And I think this is a good place to start. But certainly I think expanding this work further is the goal of all of this. This is sort of the first place to start.
Great, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that that's on folks' radar. When I was doing policy advocacy work around youth, we were really pushing for the schools to begin collecting disaggregated data so that we would be able to see actually within racial groups, be able to actually see where the targeted and culturally competent teaching and work was needed. And so I think as we're thinking in terms of the services that we provide as well and how we operationalize within the city, thinking about rather than, as much as possible, rather than monolithic groups, but groups that have a lot of difference of experiences within it. So I just want to make sure I put that on the radar. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
So one of the strengths that comes from this process that we've used, this metric of urgency process, is that it is very deeply data-driven. And so as a result of that, we've also found that there are opportunities where we're looking at processes that where we don't have the data necessarily to 100% inform our decisions, and in other places where we still need to mature the data in order to be able to get very specific about what specific problem we're wanting to solve in the process. That's really the ultimate goal of metric of urgency, is not to broadly approach work, but actually to use the data to drive so that we have really clear ideas about which projects are going to help us meet the goals. And so in one of those instances with regard to our workforce, what we've been able to do, even as a result of working very hard with our workforce and with our HR team, and Patience Ferguson, who Andrea mentioned is here in the room, with tremendous partnership with that department, what we're finding is that we have clarity on where we want to focus from a strategic needs standpoint, but we're going to take some additional time to really dig into the data and get really specific so that we know where we're focusing, what our key metrics are going to be, and what the vital few projects are going to be. And so today we are definitely asking council to support the workforce strategic need around increasing hiring and retention of people of color and of Indigenous people inside of the city's workforce, recognizing that we're going to take some additional time to get to the level of specificity around our key indicators of success and our metrics and our vital few projects, and to bring that back later on in January. So as for next steps, some of this stuff is not new. We presented this last time we did an update. We've just carved them out a bit separately for staff and for Mayor City Council. So today we are asking this council committee to adopt the initial SREEP enterprise operational goals and associated policy statements. We're also going to be asking you to adopt the workforce specific SREEP enterprise operational goal and associated policy statement when we bring that back in January. We will be looking to council to review the city vision, mission, values statements to edit that on the fly from Councilman Cunningham in January. Council and mayor will also be asked to adopt the revised city vision and mission and values in January as well, furthering define the strategic priorities in February 2019. This is that one little pie around policy that Andrea had on the slide earlier. We'll be focusing on that in February, as well as ultimately adopting the completed SREEP in March of 2019, recognizing that adoption today is the first part of that process. And while these efforts are happening with mayor and city council, staff will be completing our workforce SREEP operational plans by January 2019, defining core city services in early 2019, finalizing the SREEP in March 2019 alongside you all, and then ultimately defining and implementing the key activities related to enterprise operational goals in early 2019. And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Marsh Stevens. We have a comment or question from Council Member Gordon.
Yeah, I just wanted to express my thanks for stacking up January with some really intensive work.
Yeah, totally.
Keep this finely honed machine operating and working well, because we're used to that now.
Yeah.
And also, I'd be happy to move approval adopting these operational goals associated with the policy statements for today. And thank you for all your work and effort getting us here.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. And I do want to just hope to make sure the record reflects that we've been joined by Councilmember Ellison, or at least the public. And are there any other comments or questions for Ms. Marsh Stevens? Seeing none, I will move this item for approval, including the revised enterprise operational policies document. And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, I do want to just recognize, as the chair of the Race Equity Subcommittee, and just the effort of my predecessors, former Council Vice President Elizabeth Glidden and Councilmember Gordon, and all of the council members of the previous term for moving this race equity work forward. And thank you as members of the council now in continuing to perpetuate this work forward and including it in our, I think, historic comprehensive plan, as well as the efforts that it has taken us to get to this point. And as Council Member Gordon noted, we still have a lot of work to do, but it has been extremely gratifying to be on this journey and to see this really important work moving forward to, as Ms. Worthington discussed in her initial comments, to attempt to address some of the harms and wrongs that have been intentionally done to communities in this community and many other communities across the country. And so we consequently have to be intentional in our efforts to overcome those challenges. And so with that, I would ask all those in favor of the approval of this item indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. And that item carries. And so finally, we will receive the reports from the standing committees on matters to be considered by the full council at our regular scheduled meeting this coming Friday. I do just want to note that we do have IGR committee meeting scheduled for 2:30 following this meeting. And so we will begin with the Economic Development and Regulatory Service Committee report by Council Member Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Economic Development and Regulatory Services Committee is bringing forward 12 items for approval tomorrow. There are a number of regular items. I'll note that we're approving an application for Bus Stop Brew House. We're denying an application, which is kind of unheard of, actually, in our committee for an expansion of a liquor license for the Northeast Palace. We will be moving to withdraw that application from the agenda so that they can work with the community and then bring back a potential license upgrade sooner rather than later. I'll also note we're approving an application for Demi, as well as business licensing conditions for Eric the Red. We're making some changes in our administrative issuance of business license ordinances in item number 5. Items 6 and 7, I would say, are the most notable items on the agenda, and I would have noted they probably would have been some of the most notable items of the entire year, in that PCYC is moving forward the last bit of land that they're acquiring in order to expand their theater. This is something that has been going on for the better part of 10 years. They've raised quite a bit of private money. They have a lot of partnerships with local artists, and this will allow them to expand, as well as the land sale that we're doing at 927 West Broadway, which is moving forward with an incredible partnership to redevelop ultimately 5 buildings on West Broadway by people who are from the community, of the community, and doing incredible things in the community. They were here and spoke to the committee. They're really excited about being able to move forward. So these are 2 very large-scale economic development projects happening in North Minneapolis by people who live in North Minneapolis and work in North Minneapolis. It's really exciting. I think the committee was genuinely touched by what happened at the committee meeting. And those are items numbers 6 and 7. 8 are the regular license approvals, and 9 are the business license renewals. 10 are the business license operating conditions for a property in the 10th Ward. 11 is a license settlement recommendation for a property in the 3rd Ward. And item number 12 is a data sharing agreement with public schools for a Step Up Youth Employment Program. I'm happy to answer any questions on items 1 through 12 for a Friday.
Thank you, Chair Goodman. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we will hear the Housing Policy and Development Committee report by its chair, Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much, Chair Jenkins. The Housing Policy Committee is bringing forward 13 items. We had some pretty substantial items coming forward. But the first 5 are land sales. The 6th item is authorizing Summit House project, analysis of that project to see if it would qualify for housing improvement area financing. The 7th is authorizing project analysis on North Side Art Space, and that's to see if it would qualify for tax increment financing. 8th item is carry forward for the year 2018 of our tax exempt housing revenue bonds. Item 9 is a direction to our community planning and city coordinator staff to work on our garden lease program with sustainability office. Item 10 and 11 are perhaps more significant changes. Item 10 is adopting amendments to our unified housing policy in order to accommodate the item 11, which is directing the department to work on an inclusionary zoning policy framework. Also, our amendments to the unified housing plan will also kind of pave the way for our policy to be consistent with an ordinance amendment that's coming through Zoning and Planning Committee having to do with an interim inclusionary zoning ordinance. I will note that I'm going to be bringing in an additional amendment to number 10 to clarify the definition of student housing in our unified housing policy. Item 12 is a resolution showing support for our Minneapolis Public Housing Authority and guiding principles in terms of investments in public housing. We also gave a direction to staff to move forward developing a memorandum of understanding kind of based on that resolution or consistent with the resolution. Our 13th item is approving our first class of, I guess you could call it, I'm not sure, but the first group who will form our Minneapolis Advisory Committee on Housing appointments, and this is a great group that will help us to develop our housing policy. And that is the last item. There are 4 parts to it because there's council appointments and mayoral appointments and organizational appointments. I'm happy to stand for questions on any of those items, which I look forward to bringing forward on Friday.
Thank you, Chair Gordon. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Seeing none, we will next hear from the Public Health, Environment, Civil Rights, and Engagement Committee's Chair, Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The Public Health, Environment, Civil Rights, and Engagement Committee will be bringing forward 8 items for consideration on Friday's City Council meeting. First is confirming 11 appointments to the Civil Rights Commission. The second is a passage of ordinance amending Title 10, Chapter 203 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances relating to food code, grocery stores amending provisions related to staple foods. The number 3 is the passage of an ordinance amending Title 11, Chapter 214 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances relating to health and sanitation, Health Department creating an Office of Violence Prevention within the Health Department. Item number 4 is the passage of ordinance amending Title 2 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances related to administration, adding a new Chapter 42 entitled Municipal Identification Program. And just for my colleagues and the public to know, at this meeting, we had presentations on the Staple Food Ordinance, the Office of Violence Prevention Ordinance, as well as the Municipal ID Program Ordinance. Item number 5 is approval of 4 appointments to the Homegrown Minneapolis Food Council. Item 6 is approving 19 appointments to the Community Environmental Advisory Commission, CEAC. 7 is a site agreement with AmeriCorps to host Minnesota Opioid Response Corps member. We're actually increasing from 1 to 2 in the Health Department for next year. And our last item is the passage of a resolution accepting a donation of travel and lodging-related expenses from the National Partnership for New Americans for Michelle Rivero, Director of the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, to attend the 2018 National Immigrant Integration Conference from December 9th through 11th. I'm happy to answer any questions on these items.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Seeing none, we will now hear from the Public Safety Emergency Management Committee Chair, Councilmember Connell.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We have 8 items being brought forward to the full council for consideration and approval. Item number 1 is accepting an emergency management grant for the performance in the amount of $30,000. Item number 2 is accepting the 2018 Urban Area Security Initiatives grant from the Department of Homeland Security. Item number 3 is authorizing MPD to enter into an agreement with the state of Minnesota, the Office of State Court Administration for Court Data Services. Item number 4 is authorizing an extension on a contract with the Downtown Improvement District for policing during the Holidazzle Parade. Item number 5 is authorizing a contract with Horseman Inc. for mounted patrol boarding services. Item number 6 is approving appointments for the Police Conduct Oversight Commission. Item number 7 is approving the reappointment of Mr. Madaria Arredondo to be the Chief of Police for the City of Minneapolis, with the 3-year term beginning January 2nd, 2019. And item number 8 is the passage of an ordinance on the powers and duties of the Fire Chief and the Fire Department Activities Ordinance. I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Chair Connell. Are there any questions? Seeing none, the next report is the Transportation and Public Works Committee, given by Chair Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee forwarded 17 items to full council. Items 1 and 2 are approvals for street reconstruction projects. I'll note on item 1 that was forwarded without recommendation. Item 3 is the rental vehicle insurance policy. Item 4 is the application of the 2018 Minnesota Safe Routes to School State Infrastructure Program. Items 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are all amendments to activities of the department. Item 11 is the right-of-way agreement with Bay Systems for environmental monitoring. Items 12 and 13 are approvals of layouts and easements for road projects as listed. Item 14 is a critical traffic parking area application. Item 15 is a limited use permit with the Minnesota Department of Transportation for pedestrian bike sidewalk facility and the area listed. Item 16 is the Metro Green Line extension, Southwest LRT assignment and assumption of agreement with the Met Council. And the final item is a bid for a rental motor grade for snow removal. I stand for questions.
Thank you, Chair Wright. Are there any questions? Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Vice President Jenkins. Just a quick note on item number 1. We moved that forward without recommendation, both in TPW and in Ways and Means because of information that came forward in the meeting that needed a little bit of time to work itself out. It has done so, and I will move approval on Friday.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we will hear the Ways and Means Committee report given by Councilmember Warsame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ways and Means Committee has 14 items to bring forth to the full council. Item number 1 is the competitive bidding threshold ordinance. Item number 2 is the contracts for legal services. Item number 3 is a legal settlement. Item number 4 is also a legal settlement. Item number 5 is a contract amendment for Technology Management Corporation for additional information technology and audiovisual consulting services for the new public service building. Item number 6 is a grant from the Downtown Improvement District and amending contracts with Hennepin County Department of Community Corrections for probation officer services. Item number 7 is a bid for the 2nd Precinct Air Handler Unit Replacement Project. Item number 8 is an amendment to Mainflex Plan Document. Item number 9 is a contract amendment with Delta Dental of Minnesota for administrative services for the City of Minneapolis dental benefits. Item number 10 is a contract amendment with Northern Lights, Minnesota for consulting services relating to the Creative City Challenge. Item number 11 is a grant from the Minnesota Department of Health for innovative state and local public health strategies. Item number 12 is a contract amendment with Variant for Squeeze software application. Item number 13 is a legal settlement claim of Corey Herman. And the final item, item number 14, is the Hiawatha Maintenance Facility Campus Expansion, and that was forwarded without recommendation. And I stand for any questions.
Councilmember Gordon.
I don't have a question, but I did want to alert people to a motion I'll be making related to the first item, which is the competitive bidding threshold ordinances. Those people who are on Ways and Means will probably recall that I had some issues with that change of moving it, the threshold from $100,000 to $175,000. I've had the opportunity to work with staff and consult, and I'm not coming in to make any amendment to the 2 ordinances that are getting amended, but a staff direction to try to make sure that we're looking at those dollars and that gap and the way our departments are going to be issuing those contracts. I'll share that certainly with the chair of the committee and anybody else who's interested. But I think it'll be something that will help me feel like my concerns are being addressed, and we'll also start doing a better job of making sure that some of those millions of dollars gets in the hands of some of our women-owned, minority-owned small businesses.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. Are there any other questions or comments? The next committee report is the Zoning and Planning Committee, given by its chair, Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Zoning and Planning Committee will be bringing forward 6 items for approval on Friday. The first is we're recommending approval of passage of inclusionary zoning regulations ordinance. I do want to comment that this is a groundbreaking ordinance really pushed forward by our council president. It's also of note that this is coming forward at the exact same time that we'll be adopting the comprehensive plan, and I see this as an important step forward to make sure that we put forward some accountability to create affordable housing when we're seeing development in the city. Number 2 is the approval of appointments to the Minneapolis Arts Commission. Number 3 is the approval of a rezoning at 208 Oliver Street South. The 4th is a environmental assessment worksheet at 311 2nd Street Southeast. We're putting that forward without recommendation, and it's also with note that we have postponed the hearing on an interim use permit to the next meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee. Also, all council members should have gotten more findings of fact in your inbox this morning. Number 5 is the approval of a rezoning at 5827 Nicollet Avenue, and the 6th is the approval of a zoning code text amendment work plan, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Schrader. We have a question from Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Vice President Jenkins, and thank you to the Zoning and Planning Committee for working with us to delay a little bit. CFED staff requested additional information from Doran on item number 5, and as Councilmember Schrader noted, we received that this morning, so I expect this to move forward on Friday, but if anybody has any questions as we get a chance to study that a little bit further, please feel free to get in touch.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, that does complete the official business for this committee today. But before we adjourn, I would like to inform my colleagues and the public that the Council President and I have consulted with the clerk, and there are no business items to be addressed in our next planned cycle. So therefore, we have agreed to cancel the Committee of the Whole and the full council meetings that were tentatively set for next week. That means our final meeting of the full City Council will be this coming Friday, December 7th. That also means that this is our final meeting of this committee for the year. And so before I adjourn this meeting, I would like to claim the chair's privilege to express my thanks again to all of my colleagues who are a part of this committee and the Race Equity Subcommittee. I want to recognize the staff who have contributed to our work this year, especially Ms. Joy Marsh-Stevens, Ms. Andrea Larson, and all of those who have helped to shepherd our initial work on the city's new strategic and racial equity action plan. And of course, I want to give a special thanks to our city attorney, to the clerk of this committee, Ken Dollar, for all of their work in keeping us going these past 12 months. And I want to give a special shout out to our head clerk, Mr. Carl, Casey Carl, and I also want to just inject a little humanity into this meeting today, because I think, we've accomplished some really important steps towards moving our city a little bit closer to a more fair, more just city to all of its residents. And this day reminds me of the day that inspired this poem called Black Day. She is dangerously happy. The day is beautiful. There has never been a better time or place to be alive, she thinks. There is no life more perfect than her own, and she is right. That's a quote by Carol Masso. Yesterday was a black day, not as in dark matter or consumer spending Black Friday, though some may call City Hall a black hole. I wake up every day and go to this black hole. I have to protect my soul. But this wasn't that day. No dark clouds blocking out the sun. This was a black day as in Black people's issues were front and center. As in a time to make systemic change happen for those disabused by white supremacy. As in a city trying to make amends for the sins of its fathers by creating a racial equity agenda. As in a Black president coming to town to shake hands with the common folks. As in Professor John Powell riding in on his black horse, seeking reparations for the Black homeowners who lost their fortunes. A Black day as in the first Black director for the Community Planning and Economic Development Agency was nominated by the mayor. A Black day as in the Prince Hall Masons were negotiating building affordable senior housing in the community. Black days don't occur very often in City Hall, sometimes not at all. But as the president says, it's easy to be cynical, but hope is better. Stay hopeful. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.